Both the Sussexes and the Cambridges made statements about the Ukrainian crisis, and the internet's reaction was totally different in each case. So let's dive in each one's message to decipher the differences that might not be obvious at first sight. Welcome back, my body language buddies. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the body language guy, and it would be great if you join us by just liking this video, subscribing, and hitting that bell. Let's get down to it. The very first impression that you can have from the stark difference in the public's reaction to Harry and Meghan's message to Ukraine and what William and Kate did is one of hypocrisy. As in, why was there a different reaction since both couples just shared an online message of support? In fact, a royal commentator proposed that exact same question for Newsweek. What I'm going to do here is give you a very powerful and very practical tool to analyze text. And no, you don't need any special software or be connected to the internet or anything. The tool is very simple. When you want to analyze the intentions of a text, make sure you imagine the person that wrote it talking to you whatever is written. It works with everything, with formal, informal text, anything. It instantly reframes pure text in something that you can interpret emotionally. And of course, lets you see beyond letters and words. So let's try this brand new tool on their statements, starting with the Sussexes. Well, the header says, "We stand with the people of Ukraine." Well, this one's easy. That must be Harry and Meghan talking, right? But then you keep reading and find this. Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and all of us at Archwell. All right. So it's not just Harry and Meghan, but all the rest of the people at Archwell too. This is a huge dissonance and the first reason why people mocked this message. You have only two options. Either the voice is of Harry and Meghan, or it's an intern who wrote this. Why do I say that it was an intern? Because you cannot imagine that Harry and Meghan are going to refer to themselves as the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, right? It will be rather arrogant. But then you realize that they are the head honchos at Archwell, and the voice of such an important statement could not be of an intern. This text represents the voice of Harry and Meghan. They are the ones responsible of speaking through this written message. So just by including the titles, it just sounds ridiculous right off the bat. These people are not gonna learn. They should have put just Harry and Meghan. That's it. First names. That's the best way to become relatable, to connect in a human way. Well, we already know that connecting in a human way is not this couple's greatest asset, but you have to start somewhere. They only include "and all of us at Archwell" because they didn't want to sound so self-centered. But they failed miserably. That's like adding a couple more lettuce leaves to a hamburger because you don't want it to look unhealthy. Notice the difference when William and Catherine address the same subject with the Kensington Royal account. They sign at the end with just the initials of their first names. Is that formal? No, it isn't at all. But that's a way of balancing the fact of speaking through the formal channel, Kensington Royal of the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. It's a formal channel, but you sign off informally. That's what makes it so much more warm, and that's a way that you adapt your voice to the channels that you use. Ironic, because the Harkles, especially Meghan, have always tried to push an image of revolutionary, of breaking the laws of tradition, and they don't even know how to be warm with the message. It's important to notice that both messages have more or less the same length, around 250 characters. But in Harry and Meghan's case, 55 characters were spent just on their names and titles. More than 20% of their message was spent on themselves, up front, opening the statement. In contrast, William and Catherine's signature was just 1% of their message. And at the very end, yeah, that signals a huge difference in egos. But anyway, let's continue. We stand with the people of Ukraine against this breach of international and humanitarian law. It's interesting that this sentence could be the only point of convergence with the Cambridge's message. Today we stand with the president and all of Ukraine's people as they bravely fight for that future. But how did the Harkles finish this statement? Encourage the global community and its leaders to do the same. Now, if rubbing their titles on our faces wasn't ridiculous enough, they dared to pontificate too. Talk about ego again. It's perfectly fine if you want to make a statement, to assume a position about an international affair, but do not believe for 1 second that you have the right to tell others what to do. That is, by the way, the second rule to keep your sanity on Twitter. The first one is, of course, do not use Twitter. Nobody likes to be told what to do, especially if it comes from an overprivileged moaning couple that ironically loves suing others for reporting their misbehavior. You cannot make this up. But there is one factor that we are missing from the Cambridge's message, and it's the point that makes this comparison worthy. You might have noticed that the biggest difference between both statements is that William and Catherine address President Zelensky and the First Lady directly. They have the benefit that they met them less than 2 years ago, as working royals, so they're in a much better position to address them personally. That is leverage and credibility because it always boils down to personal stories. And it's not like President Zelensky and the First Lady are the only ones fighting. That's why both Cambridges and Sussexes make a reference to the Ukrainian people. But when you name people directly, especially if you already met them, it will always add massive impact to your message. Now, the Ukrainian president publicly answered to William and Catherine, and of course not to the Harkles. And this is amusing, to say the least, because Harry and Meghan's fans were, let's say, a bit triggered by it, as Richard Eden mentioned briefly. But a lot of people did not realize that the message from the Cambridges was of a diplomatic nature, whereas the Harkles are just self-serving, glorified influencers. They decided to be private citizens. Well, assume that you will be treated as private citizens. You see Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively making a pledge to match donations of up to $1 million for humanitarian efforts. And it's understood that they are celebrities. Nobody expects them to be acknowledged from a political standpoint. And they are giving, let's do the math, 1 million more than the Harkles. We talk a lot about body language in this channel, but what we really want to learn is human behavior. And one critical part is how we communicate. Yes, nonverbal communication can be fascinating, and we could spend weeks talking about it, but we cannot afford to take for granted verbal expression, or in this case, written words. And I'm not making fun of the Harkles. They are the ones making fun of themselves, because they just don't bother to check with someone who knows this stuff, and that's their problem. But this can happen to any of us if we don't take the time to think about our written communications. Yes, it's fun to analyze others' emails and letters and texts, but what about their perception of us? In fact, there's another cheat code very simple to implement that will really boost your written communication. When you need to write something important, do it in 3 steps. First, write it longhand with pen or pencil and paper. Second, after you think you have finished, stand up and read it aloud, thinking that you're reading it to the person it's for. And third, cut everything redundant and simplify sentences as much as you can. Yeah, I know it's way more convenient to write it directly on your computer, but this 3-step process is the most effective and least expensive way to improve your writing. Give it a try and let me know. If you want to refine your observation skills, all you have to do is download my 100 body language tips right in the description of this video. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas, and it will always be a pleasure, my body language buddies. Much love and bliss.